How are you, Bill?
Welcome, everyone. We are starting a special meeting of the Public Safety Committee. This meeting is in place of the regularly scheduled meeting, which was canceled for non-agenda items, a summer month or whatever, and then, of course, the storm came. So we scheduled a special meeting, and nothing on the agenda but the past storm and the rains that we've experienced. So, having called to order the meeting Monday, July 17th, 2023 at 6 p.m. in the council chambers. And we will start right off with our review of July 3rd, 2023 flooding event, town response. And we have our fire chief here who is our fire chief, who is also handling emergency management duties at this point, and orchestrated our response for most of our emergencies in town. First responders. Chief Garahy.
Thank you, Ed. I just hit with a brief, well, not too brief, but an overview of the incident. I see a lot of familiar faces here, and I know I talked to a lot of you on that night. We were called to 315 Cedar Hollow Drive at 19 minutes after 8 for water in the basement. And our typical response is the two closest stations, which we sent there. While en route, I saw that Main Street was flooded over, and we had a vehicle stuck in the water, and the vehicle was occupied. So at that point, I diverted the rescue truck, which was one of the assets, one of 4, heading to Cedar Hollow. I diverted them to Main Street in case we had to do a rescue and get the people out of the flooded vehicle. Luckily, at that point, the water just happened to recede enough to walk them out. The PD was extremely helpful in doing that and accomplishing that. So we then proceeded to Cedar Hollow, and at that point, the town had received about 2 inches of rain, according to the Community Collaborative Rain and Hail Snow Network.com, with a total of 2.5 over a 24-hour period. 2 minutes after that first call, a lot of stuff happened in those few minutes. 2 minutes after the first call, at 21 minutes after 8, we received a second call for 515 Cedar Hollow for water in the basement. That added the third town station, okay? And that brought in assets from New Britain Avenue. Let's see. We go on to say here that the water created a river effect that ran from the northwest corner of the Cedar Hollow complex behind the 300 building, through the parking area, and directly to the rear of the 500 building. The force of the water at the rear of 500 blew out the rear basement windows on the end units, 514 and 515, causing severe flooding, excuse me, from units 508, excuse me, to 515, noting that there is no 513. Several units had approximately 8 feet deep of water encompassing the entire basement of the condos. And the water continued down the sloped driveway past the 400 and 600 buildings, causing minor flooding in both buildings and various units. Both 300, 400, and 600 buildings sustained flooding in several units from 1 to 4 inches in the basement. Okay, the report goes on to talk about a little topographical information. It talks about Main Street and Kelso Road sitting 106 feet above sea level, and the 500 building at Cedar Hollow sits 89 feet above sea level. And with the driveway between the 400 and 600 buildings sitting at 82 feet above sea level, this causing a natural track for the water to follow. The incident commander at that point broke Cedar Hollow complex into two zones. The northwest zone consisting of 1 in 300 buildings, and the southwest 4 to 600. Station 1 and Utility 1 were assigned to the northwest zone and investigated the interior of the buildings to determine the damage. Company 3 was on the first call. Utility 3 and Rescue 3 were split into the southwest zone to investigate the 4 and 600 buildings. And upon Station 2's arrival, Utility Truck 2, they were sent to Building 100 to investigate the source of the flooding behind the units. After investigation, it was determined that the 500 building was the priority, with the water levels in the basements impacting electrical systems and gas appliances in the basement. Eversource and CNG were called to the scene to secure the services of the impacted units. Units 506 through 515 were deemed inhabitable due to damage and loss of power and gas. Residents in 508, 509, 510, and 512 reported that they had no other place to evacuate to, and at that point, the town human services director was contacted and arrangements were made to put the evacuated residents in the Hampton Inn on Cromwell Avenue. All other residents found alternative housing for the evening with family or friends. Multiple pumps were used in the operation of the 500 building to drop the water level to prevent further damage. Station 1 also used pumps in the 300 building on units with the higher amount of water. During this period, we also had a call for wires down on Dividend Road, which we addressed. The assignment from Dividend Road, again, different assets in the town, were then requested to the scene for manpower. So we brought in more manpower at that point, too. They were immediately put to work upon arrival, assisting with the secondary investigation into all buildings to check all gas appliances. Once the inspection was completed, Truck 1 was returned to the station to be held in quarters, and Truck 2 was held on scene, available for further town response. Butler Construction was contacted regarding the retaining wall in Kelson Row, and they responded with manpower to augment and repair the berm to prevent further flooding. Eversource responded and secured power to 509 through 515 due to the level of water in the basement and the electrical boxes being submerged. Now, I do want to say that we didn't pull all the power that night because we were running the electric submersible pumps off the building power. We had every pump that the department owns working that night, and we wouldn't have been able to, with the assets on scene, provide enough generator power. So it was better that we just used the building power. It was deemed safe. We talked to Eversource, and that's why some of those buildings, the meters were pulled later versus earlier. CNG did respond and secured gas to the entire 500 building to the flooding impacts on the gas appliances in the basement. CNG also inspected the remaining buildings in the complex and stated no other building would be impacted. Due to additional weather predictions, the PD command truck was requested to respond, and the unit was placed in the northwest driveway used for command support and monitoring weather. At one point, we had to place our crews in the vehicles while a thunderstorm moved through the area. Once the weather cleared, the units re-engaged in their operation phase of the incident, and all pumps were kept in operation while the crews took shelter. A member of the condo board presented herself to the incident commander, and she was requested to contact the condo association. She was requested to contact the condo association and request a response. A representative from Imagineers arrived and was taken through the complex and shown the various levels of damage. We advised the condo association representative that the fire department can only bring down the levels of the water to between 4 and 12 inches in the heaviest damaged units due to debris in the water and the mud clogging the pumps. And as we got down towards the bottom of those affected condos, that muddy water was like cement and trying to pump that through, and it just wasn't going anywhere. So we did our best there. The association reported that they would have repair crews on site in the morning to begin the process of removing the remaining water and debris in all the units throughout the complex. They were provided a list of units that received damage prior to our departure, with the water levels as low as possible. Using FD pumps, all equipment was picked up and placed back in the back of Unit 41 and brought to the headquarters. Unit 41 is one of our utility trucks. And due to the debris in the water, we brought in additional staff the next day, the 4th of July, to clean the hose and to strip down the pumps and clean the insides of them. We did, however, have plenty of assets available for the remainder of the evening, should we be called. All units were cleared from the scene and command terminated. So that's just a brief overview of what we did on the 3rd in the 3.5, 4 hours that we were there. I have a little supplemental report here. And on 7/9, which I believe was a Sunday evening, I received a call from our state rep, Kerry Wood, requesting sandbags to be delivered to Cedar Hollow. Flood warning had just been issued, and it went off through everybody's phones through the state alert system. However, that flood warning, after a little looking into it, was for the northwest corner of Connecticut, the Cornwall area, the Norfolk area. They were experiencing a ton of rain, and we weren't at that point. Myself and Kerry, we talked about ways that the contractor could put plywood into the casement windows, which would provide adequate water control. During this conversation, Kerry mentioned that insurance was not covering some of the loss and that the Red Cross was getting involved. The next morning, we received emails from the Red Cross requesting information about the loss, and the requested information was provided by the fire marshal. The Red Cross was planning on making a site visit, and I offered to escort them to give them a better understanding of the incident. And that tour occurred in the early afternoon of July 11th. And again, Representative Wood and representative from Representative Larson's office was there. While we were there, it was noted that a large contingent from Blue Sky Environmental was on site performing a cleanup. There were several dumpsters of debris in the process of being switched out, and also a large vac truck had just departed as it was full of mud and water. We toured the 500 building, and during this tour, a natural gas leak was found in the rear of the building. We contacted CNG. CNG came out, and I believe they had to do some underground work. After the tour, the Red Cross committed to assisting 5 families consisting of 7 adults and 3 children. They also offered to assist 3 other families from units 511, 514, and 515 as needed. And lastly, they were unable to access unit 507, but messages were left. This was confirmed by an email from the Red Cross response director. His name is John Basso, and I received that email on July 14th. And just the last line of the supplemental reads that the area was checked during the storm on July 16th, and I didn't see any hazards when I checked that 2-3 times. So, Mr. Chairman, that's what I have.
Great. Appreciate that. Do we have Chief Collette providing any general response information for this?
I think the fire chief summed it up for our response to the initial, and we turn over scenes like that to the FD and then supplement them.
Great. Councilor Prakash?
Yeah, sure. I have a lot of questions, Chief. So I will just break it down, actually, into a few different buckets. I'll start with the operations phase, right? I'm just calling the 7-3 as the operations phase,
Okay.
as you described it, right? I'm just picking that word for my own benefit. And looks like on that night, from a standard operating procedures purposes, right? Did you follow all standard operating procedure?
Yes, we did. On residential water calls, we send 2 stations, okay? That was the initial response, although the rescue truck was detoured for a few minutes. I don't think it had any effect on the incident. And then when the second call came in, several minutes later, we added the 3rd station to there. We also supplemented additional manpower when we cleared up a wires down call on Dividend Road. And they were more there to assist with hazard control, ensuring that the gas was safe. We had Eversource on scene for electrical, but we also wanted to put some more people into that scene. I believe we had a total of, that night, 26 firefighters on scene.
All right. And for purposes of some historical context here, have you been responding to the site before this event? Is this a recurring event for the condo complex, or is it not? Also, I would like you to include in that list anything around that area, not just this condo complex, in the topography you mentioned.
Okay, well, I can't answer that entire question for you. However, I do have the Cedar Hollow incidents by date and by situation, and this list goes back to 2010. And on this list, we have 7 water calls there, okay?
But none of this nature, right? Obviously, not to this extent.
We do have a couple of this nature. We have one of this nature in 2018, October 2018. Just bear with me one here. And that was, we received a call from 303 Cedar Hollow, and 303, 305 had water in the basement. We have one from 2016, however, this is a hot water heater that sprung a leak. We have one from 2012, and there's not much information on this report, and please understand that about 2015, 2016, we switched report databases, and we imported the information in, but this was from...
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
So, Chief, the reason I'm asking that question is because I will, at the end of this, you'll see why I was going there, because I want to talk also about proactive measures we can take at the end of this meeting. We can discuss some of that, but just to have a historical context will be good here. And also, I'm not going into the insurance side of things here, and what the damage looked like. Was it caused by rainwater or not? I think those are all different questions, but I'm going to move on from here, but I'll circle back to this later. The question I have for that night, an additional question, is you did mention in your report that a couple of families, and correct me if I wrote this wrong, were relocated to a facility somewhere in the town.
The Hampton Inn on Cromwell Ave, yes.
Right. Is that standard operating procedure as well?
Yes, we
And-
will do that.
Can you talk a little bit about that, what that procedure looked like?
Well, that procedure, from my standpoint, is very, very simple. When we find an area that's uninhabited on an incident we're on, it's very simply a call to the Human Services Director, who steps right up and helps us out with that. It's a very seamless and, if you will, flawless system.
So what is our policy around that process? How many days do we provide the owner of the building which you deemed inhabitable?
That's a great question. That policy doesn't sit with the fire department. I'd like to ask the town manager or the human services director to help me out with that.
Is Melissa here? Oh, maybe you can answer that, Melissa. It's pretty standard.
Melissa, if you don't mind, if you come up to the podium, because I just wanted to be on the record. It won't pick it up. Thank you.
Sure thing. Good evening. I'm Melissa Hicks, the Director of Human Youth and Senior Services. So to answer your question, there is no policy in writing regarding that. We here in Rocky Hill base our relief on the funds available. So based on donations and fundraisers that we do in town, we have access to a fund for residents that is money raised by residents that we use as at our discretion. So typically that fund is used for if somebody is stranded or homeless in extreme weather. But we feel in those moments late at night if in a disaster situation. So we initially put them up for 24 hours, then realizing late that night that the next day was the 4th of July and a holiday. So we extended it to all 4 of the rooms a second night, and then 2 of those residents did have an extra day or 2 while they were working out insurance options. And we were available to help out. So I don't know if that answers your question. It's not a very specific policy, but as long as we have funds here in town, we are never going to leave and have never had to leave a resident without.
No, it does answer my question. I was just looking at like what is, even if it is not written, there's an understanding, and what do you follow?
In this
Yeah,
town have an
that's it.
understanding. In
Yeah.
other towns I do know who suffered floods did not have any funding or any municipal help, but we did.
Right. It's like case law. Like, it's fine.
Correct.
Like, it works for me. So thank you.
Sure. Yep.
And actually, if you want to just stay, because I don't want to keep calling you back
That's
and
fine.
forth. So for that night, Chief, so we placed families like Melissa did. And then on the cleanup side, you mentioned Imagineers. Can you elaborate on that? Who are Imagineers?
Imagineers is the maintenance company from Cedar Hollow. I didn't converse with the gentleman from Imagineers too much, but what he said to us that night was he would take care of everything. He'd be there the next day with a mitigation company, and they'd start working on it.
And you mentioned another one, and I apologize because I don't know all these different pieces. So who are the Blue
Sky?
Origin? Yeah.
Blue Sky
Blue Sky, thank you.
is a local restoration company. I believe they're national, but I believe their office is out of Glastonbury, and they are Imagineers contractor.
Okay, so essentially at this point, on July 3rd, you have transferred responsibility for any cleanup, post-cleanup, to Imagineers/Blue Sky.
Right.
Is that standard?
Yes, we're the fire department. We eliminate the hazards. We take it as best as we can take it, as we did that night. But as for the final cleanup, that's really not our responsibility to come in the next day and so forth. If there was more water the next day, we'd obviously come back and eliminate or mitigate that hazard.
Right.
But
So
that's- yeah.
No, thank you. So then I want to move to like what I'm calling phase 2 here. And the phase 2, like you mentioned, like starts on 7/9 kind of. And thanks to Representative Wood for making that call for those sandbags. And thankfully, they were not required, but you worked with the representative there and then the town manager and got the sandbags there. Is that correct?
No, I didn't deliver any sandbags there. I'm sorry.
But the sandbags were delivered or not delivered?
No, the highway department delivered sand and I think bags for residents who wanted to use them at the time.
Okay, so ultimately, the town delivered the sandbags, right? Is that? Okay. I just want to make sure things were delivered as I understand them, and because sandbags were mentioned there. So, thank you. And again, thanks for Representative Wood for working with the town manager, and the highway department for doing that. Like I said, thankfully, nothing big happened. In this time period, Melissa, was there anybody reached out to you from the condo complexes about the accommodations? Because what I want to know next is about the involvement of Red Cross, right? Which I actually, again, I thank Representative Wood for coordinating that, as the fire chief described, with the town. And we were able to get 5 families, as I understand, into a Red Cross accommodation, which is, in my view, the system working as it should. But I wanted to ask you if there is a gap here somewhere between Red Cross coming in after the initial accommodation versus, I just want to understand that dynamic a little bit.
So it's my understanding that the Red Cross provided some of the residents with options, but also most of them got a monetary supplement to help wherever they chose to be. That is my understanding. As far as a gap, as far as I knew, and coming in for the rest of the week after the holiday, we were informed by the hotel that a couple of the residents had found other accommodations. Some were staying on. I have since met with 2 or 3 of the residents and working going forward, finding other programs that they're either eligible for or to include today, as a matter of fact. This morning, I met with another resident and looking into some other benefits that resident may be eligible for. As far as more a 2 to 3 month time period now, we're starting to look at the length of time we're expecting for renovations to take place. So somewhere they can be safe that isn't as expensive as the hotel, but also, maybe a month-to-month lease or somewhere that's sort of a semi in the middle. Not a long-term rental, but somewhere that will accommodate 2 or 3 months. That's the phase that I'm in working right now. But I'm unaware of any gaps. Certainly, we had a couple of residents reach out that did not have a place to go, and the town manager and I spoke along with a couple other directors, and we were able to extend and made sure. And the statement was made amongst us that I am aware of, that we were not going to let any residents be on the streets or without accommodations. So to my knowledge, there was no gap.
Sure.
Difficult, yes, I do know it's difficult. And the state representatives have been wonderful and reached out. I know the emails, the communication on my end was top notch.
No, thank you. So I will turn to the town manager here. The town manager, what I understand, Ray, is from these conversations that you have been able to work with Representative Wood and the fire department, and obviously your own human services department here, and able to bridge some of these gaps in our what I'll call phase 2, right, where there is a real need for residents in absence of insurance coverage, right? For accommodation and other things, obviously there is a rebuild effort which needs to take place within the condo complex, and where that responsibility lies in terms of insurance. I want to talk about that later. Probably that's a question for Representative Wood about the insurance committee, and she chairs that committee. So maybe I will reserve that. But where I wanted to go with this was, I think from my perspective, what I'm hearing, Ray, is town's response from your perspective, the fire chief's perspective, and Melissa's perspective, what you were able to do with Representative Wood was appropriate during that time, and it was standard operating procedure. That's what I want to know, and if you have anything to add there.
Absolutely. I praise the response of the fire department, the police department, and Melissa, highway department, all personnel involved. I can't say anything more in detail than Chief Gary had already explained.
No, and that's fair. Yeah.
And the coordination continues. The town manager's office, through the mayor's office, and the finance department have been in contact with the state FEMA, with the lieutenant governor's office, with NRCS, looking for possible funding sources for assistance for the town and for the residents, as well as for the flooding that's occurring along the Connecticut River. So the coordination is continuing. We haven't stopped at this point.
Right. And one last question to you. Has there been any communication, anything you can add from the perspective of Kelson Row was mentioned here a couple of times. From an engineering perspective, is there something, I don't know if town has to look at it or the property owner? I would assume like there is a responsibility with the property owner in terms of the engineering side of things and looking at the topography and things like that.
Yeah.
But if whatever you need to add there, I don't have really a question. I just wanted for you to have that.
We have a lot to add there. On July 5th or 6th, I believe, we met with Kelson Row developers, owners, contractors on site here in this room with our development staff. Steve Sopelak is here. He can give you a general overview of some of the issues that were on the site and some of the issues that have been taken care of already. That site has been permitted by Army Corps and DEEP already. So, everything they've done so far is in conformance to engineering standards. I can just imagine what the velocity of that water would have been if all that pavement was still there. So, maybe this site, even in its current configuration, with the remediation that's already been done after this event, Cedar Hollow is in much better shape than it was prior. So, but Steve is here to give you some detail on the engineering and what
thank
we
you,
talked
Melissa.
about. What we talked about after this incident.
So I have a host of items. I'll try and, I don't want to gloss over them, but I also don't want to take too much time and give you a lesson on hydrology either. That could easily be a semester class in college.
Excuse me, who is this?
Steve Soplak, Director of Community Development, Public Works, and the town engineer. So going back, just so you understand, there's a pipe that runs from Silas Deane Highway to the property line between, I'm going to call it Ames, it's Kelson Row, and Cedar Hollow. That pipe was put it was designed in 1969. All the water that led to that, it's an 82-acre watershed, very large. It comes from Grimes Road, Ashwell, Garden, Silas Deane. All those roads are state roads up until 1962. So then in 1973, Cedar Hollow was designed, they have a pipe to pick up the remainder and go. Over the years, the Ames site was expanded. It was a Finest, First National, then they added Grants, then it all became Ames. They added parking, more parking, got more land, and that ended somewhere in the 90s, I believe was the last expansion. And one of those expansions, they put an underground detention pond. And a detention pond is designed for a 100-year storm. The data I have from different weather stations, the closest one being in Carillon, shows us as about a 1,000-year storm. So we don't design, no one designs for that kind of event. Also, if you go back to 1969, rainfall intensities were much lower than they are now. People don't want to talk climate change, but the national NOAA keeps changing these. They hadn't changed them in decades, and in I think it's 2014 they changed, and they're changing again. I've been told in the next couple months. So when you look at the intensity, that's inches per hour. So usually you get a higher intensity over a shorter amount of time. So let's say 5 minutes. In 2000, back in 1969 when I was developed, a 100-year storm was considered 8.3 inches an hour over a 5-minute period. In 2014, it was 11.6 inches an hour. That's a couple inches raise, and it's going to raise again. So hydrology is not an exact science. So as the town manager said, you also got to take into consider paved surfaces versus non-paved versus vegetated. If that was all parking like it was and still paved, I fear it probably would have been worse. I can't say for sure. Now, moving ahead, we've met with the developer. They've done everything they're supposed to do. The drainage study they did, we don't do the study ourselves. We don't actually get into the weeds and reproduce their numbers. We look and say, yes, these seem to be in line. It all goes into a computer, so garbage in, garbage out. So you want to make sure what they're putting in is reasonable. It's reasonable. It comes out. They're saying there's going to be no increase in runoff. They went through DEP, because after 5 acres of disturbance, you have to have the DEP review. They signed off on it. And DOT, because they're on the road there, state road, they have to go get their OSTA permit. And one of the things with the OSTA permit is also DOT has to review the drainage. They reviewed it. So there's 3 different agencies that have looked at it and said it was okay. So now where we're at is the consultant for the developer, their engineer, is taking all the historical data I had, supplementing with theirs, and just rerunning their numbers for the whole 82-acre watershed. They've also hired a firm to go out and television the lines. They found no blockages, so the pipes are clear and running. Although they did find a little blockage going towards Village Condo, I think it's called. But at the time, they also had a truck to clean the lines, so they cleaned the lines to that. When were they out there? Friday? I think it was Friday.
Probably Friday.
I think it was Friday they were out there. Yeah. Ahead of the you were mentioning the 7th, I think it was. Representative Wood asked for sandbags. I also asked that developer at the same time, please provide them with sandbags. They couldn't get them because the time of the day, and the supply houses were closing. But we asked them, and our Public Works provided bags, empty bags, and then a pile of sand, so you could make them yourself. But I asked them also to please provide and put around, especially is it Building 500 that was the worst flooded?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if that's happened, because that was 2 weeks, week and a half ago. There was a threat for this weekend, and that developer was out there. They had rebuilt everything that's shown on the plan, and then they added actually a secondary berm. So, and they created a trench at the road. One of our biggest problems is, as we started with, the drainage from the old state roads, which are now ours, and the Silas Deane Highway. They know their system's undersized. It's been that way for many, many years. And the problem is, they have to bring it all the way out. It discharges through Cedar Hollow. So if the state was to rebuild, I think they'd probably have to go through the Kelson site, through Cedar Hollow to do it. And, Cedar Hollow owns their section. And through the Kelson site, we just found out, we always thought it was the state, because as I said, it's always state roads discharging there. We just found out like a couple days ago, that's our 42-inch pipe. So.
Yeah, so the reason this is very helpful, by the way. Thank you, Steve. And by the way, thank you, Melissa. There, I forgot to, thank you there. But this is really helpful, because what I'm thinking about this is, it's great, like you did all this like fact finding and all the engineering surveying work. In terms of how to avoid a situation like this, I think that's where I wanted to go with this, with the developers' collaboration, right? Obviously, right here, which is paramount, right? So I don't want, you might not have an answer right now, but I just wanted to keep that view and just make sure that we are on the ball on that. That's all.
So yeah, and as I was going to say, something like this is catastrophic. It's, you don't want to say biblical, but it's the kind of thing that I don't think it could have been avoided. It was, like I said, the data showing it's on the verge of a 1,000-year storm. Our pipes in the road are designed for a 10-year storm, and detention ponds are a 100-year storm. So, I mean, this is something that's far and above. So, yeah, you would have had that.
Yeah, so, no, thank you. And I think
It's hard to explain because everything's on a logarithmic scale and
No, I understand. I understand. So thank you. I think I have the basic facts. I just wanted to wrap up with this is, I wanted to say, in terms of phase 3, we talked about the phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 3 is something going forward, what can we do in terms of these insurance gaps? And I want when Representative Wood and Senator Lesser are able to add their inputs here, I would love to come back, Mr. Chairman, and talk a little bit about that phase 3 and what we can do from the state's perspective to help us out, because it looks like to me the town and Representative Wood work pretty well together until that phase 1 and phase 2, but I think the phase 3 is critical, and I want to circle back on that. So thank you. Thanks for being patient with me. Thank you.
If I could just add, I was saying, I think a lot of the water, I wasn't here, but Chief said that there was a problem on Silas Dean. That's because, as they're saying, the water is not getting through that pipe on the Silas Dean. So I think a lot of the water is coming up and spilling over, and that's where a lot of the problem came from. It just wasn't coming from that site. It was coming from all beyond, bubbling up and running down. And then also, just for everybody's knowledge, everybody's talking about the erosion control out there. They're inspecting it basically on every storm. I have copies of the report.
Yeah, I just have a problem-solving mode on this. Like, I just want to make sure that we are doing everything we should be doing, and going forward, like, we mitigate the risk of this sort of like event happening again. That's all like I'm trying to gather here. So, but thank you.
Councilor O'Sullivan?
No, I'd like to give the public a chance to be heard. I'll pass.
Well, we have special guests, so we're going to go first to our mayor. Any comment that you would like to make, having heard the presentation so far?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, everyone, for coming out this evening. I honestly, I don't typically attend public safety meetings, so outside of COVID, I didn't ever anticipate having to come in for another catastrophic event, and yet here we are. So I just want to start with thanking the chief, Chief Garahy, for his coordinated response that night. I was there that night. It looked like an absolute war zone. It's an image that will never leave my mind. I think you said you had 26 firefighters out there. I just remember seeing every inch of that development covered with a fire engine or emergency responder, and the hoses coming out, and people being frantic, and people also wanting to help. So I give a lot of credit to the homeowners who were out there trying to do what they could do for their fellow neighbors. And a really huge thank you to you, Chief, and to Melissa from Human Services, Chief Klepp, and everyone else who was involved in that emergency time period. I think for myself, I'm trying to sort it out because lots of folks are asking me what our next steps, and I think you sort of did that, Councilor Prakash. In my mind, I see things in groups. So I think we had that initial emergency response time sort of in my mind as a phase. If you were calling them phases, perhaps that would be phase 1. Phase 2 is the coordination with Representative Wood. Thank you so much for doing that. Absolutely necessary. And Human Services. I think we're actually in what I would think is phase 3 now, which is that continuing of the investigation. I know that we have spoke with the developer, and they have their engineers working out a plan, a new sort of what would you call it? Drainage plan, new engineering. Their engineers have told us it'll be about 10 days for that plan to come in, and then we'll take a look at it. If there's any good in a horrible, horrible situation, we sort of need to look for it so that we can move forward. The good that I see in this is that we will now have a new engineering study that will allow us to take into account catastrophic rain like this in that 1,000-year flood plan as opposed to the 100-year flood plan. And so I look forward to getting that result and giving you guys an update, or at least Public Safety will give you an update on that. And then I suppose our final phase will be the resolution and implementation of those plans and reassurance for our homeowners. I want to say in terms of what we can do for the homeowners at this time, I think between Ray and I, we have reached out to every state agency that exists, and there are some grant funding opportunities. Most of them come from FEMA, others come from different sources, some come from the Department of Agriculture, because our farmers are equally negatively impacted by this rainfall. And so we have these two categories of folks that we're trying very, very hard to find the resources and the tools to support them. As a general rule, when you have this type of weather event, and we're talking about the groundwater damage here. It's a unique situation, and what we need in order to tap into funding that will help compensate the municipality for all of the resources and the time and the overtime that was put into it, and then other grants that could potentially help residents, whether those are low-interest loans or other opportunities through various agencies that the state has. We need a declaration of emergency from the governor. What Ray and I did the other day is we called the lieutenant governor and we kind of said, hey, do you have anyone that we could talk to? Because we know that there are all of these programs. And I want to say that Frank Gagliardo from DEEP was absolutely incredible. He shot off, I called him in the morning. He shot off this mega email with every possible avenue that we could explore. We've started exploring them, but again, we needed that state of emergency. So Lieutenant Governor told us she was actually out that day. She had been out prior to that day, actually looking at farmland and various flood zones. The governor has been out looking at it. We have a meeting with the governor. I'm really happy to say that he put Rocky Hill on his list. So he will be here. He will come with the commissioner from the Department of Agriculture as well as with some federal and state officials. And so we're getting closer, I think, to finding hopefully opportunities to provide relief. And if in fact there is a declaration, then we can put out that information and we can see how the town, how the farms, and then how individual homeowners might fit the criteria. I don't know if we will, but we'll try, and we will help folks work through that process. And I think that's about all I want to say at this time.
Just let me add that just before 5, I did get a call from Senator Murphy. So I did put Cedar Hollow on his radar also, in addition to, he had originally called regarding the flooding for the farmland. So that's just another avenue we can work
So
on.
State Representative Wood is here, and I may, if you'd like to speak, but Senator Lesser's asked if he could go first. He is on our Zoom link. So Senator Lesser.
Thank you. I'm happy to let Representative Wood go first. That's fine.
Well, thank you. That's great, because definitely she had boots on the ground.
Hey, everybody. Good to see you all. Thank you for holding this meeting, Deputy Mayor. I was notified of this event. My name is Carrie Wood. I'm the state representative from Rocky Hill and Weathersfield. And I was notified of this event on the Friday after the 3rd. So it was after this had happened. A woman, Rachel from Imagineers, reached out to me, and I asked her if she would let the residents know that I'd be on site on Sunday. And everyone came out, and I just want to let everyone know that hasn't been there, that it was a devastation. I mean, it is worse than you can even imagine. People's things, their family heirlooms, their most precious possessions are covered in mud and not even salvageable, because that all has to go into the dumpster because it's, this mud and debris that's on it, you just can't clean it. So it was really a heart-wrenching situation with people not really knowing, what to do. So I just listened to everyone and got to work on anything that I could do. And I think, like all of us, I just kind of hit the phones. So I did talk to the governor's office immediately and ask them to declare an emergency so that we could tap into FEMA money. That is long-term. So that's,
It hasn't been called yet, right?
Right. I did call Congressman John Larson's office, and his legislative liaison, Colin Duran, set up the meeting with the Red Cross. The chief also had reached out to them, so our coordination worked great. I've collected all the insurance information from both the condo association and the residents. All were declined, by the way. I am working with the government affairs people, with all the insurance companies, to appeal those and just see what we can do with that, because they're really like, where's the money coming from is really the question that we all have when we're there. I have asked the developer to provide housing for displaced residents. He had offered a couple units to people. So that is something that is going on. I've contacted also corporate donors. There's a GoFundMe page that was set up because my concern is the immediate needs of getting these places clean, of drying them out, of getting HVAC units back up and running. That is what I'd love to coordinate with this committee on. I contacted the Department of Veterans Affairs. There is a gentleman who is a 90-year-old veteran that was displaced, so he does have access to funds and housing and other things, so I know he's been in touch with the deputy commissioner there. I've also reached out to Melissa Hicks and the town manager. There's a Small Cities Block development grant that goes into some municipalities' funds for housing people. So can I help the town get more money, into that fund rate? And I talked about that I'll be following up on. Just reached out to everyone I think that I see in this room that works for town government to say, what are we doing, the sandbags and all of that stuff. So that's what I did. I will continue to be here to help the town, any sort of grant opportunities to help the residents with any sort of nonprofit funding, anything that we can do, because I do see an immediate need. I know that there's talk of a lawsuit and there's talk of FEMA and all of that, but there's an immediate need right now. We're talking about the most devastated units. There's units that had 1 inch of water. That's 1 inch of water that's festering and has mold. There's units that had 3 inches of water. So those are lingering right now. I've gotten calls from residents saying, I don't know I don't have the money. Some residents do have the money and they went in and pulled it out, others don't. So that's kind of what I've been appealing to, the public, to the human side of us. This town is wonderful in helping people, and if we could get some money together to really just help these residents, it really was devastation that happened there, and so I'd love us all to kind of come together now and help them. Thank you.
I just have 3 quick questions. Wait, now I lost my notes because I have 2 different notebooks going. Hold on 1 second. Where do you, if you know, where is the governor in terms of potentially issuing a state of emergency?
I think we're there. This morning we were at a farm in South Glastonbury, and I didn't realize, and the farmers can fill us in on this, that even the crops that have the river water on them, I thought that if the water resides, we can still, all of that needs to be churned under and harrowed, I think is the word. So that was shocking. So, we have major devastation that I think until you get the government officials there and walking around and seeing, they're like, oh yeah, there's flooding. But then you see it and you're like, wow, a lot of our food source in Connecticut is underwater. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really hit home. Congressman Larson and Senator Blumenthal were also there, and there was nothing but unwavering support for declaring an emergency, which would mean tapping into FEMA dollars, which the farmers in the room know. FEMA is providing assistance for the frost that happened in the spring, but applications to get that money just went out. So you can see the time frame for how far federal government assistance would be. So it's great that we can tap into it at some point, but it's just something in the distance.
But FEMA isn't the only program. That's the issue. There's a lot of programs in Connecticut that require the governor's sign off.
Yep.
So not just FEMA. That I think would be more immediate.
And right now, just for the farmers in the room, I know we're talking about Cedar Hollow, but there is the DECD, and I just posted this, and I'm happy to share with anyone over email or phone. There is a boost fund that's available now for immediate access to low-interest loans. So that is something that's available, and there's a bunch of things that I listed at the press conference that the Department of Agriculture is unveiling for the farmers.
Awesome. And then the other thing is, just to clarify, with respect to the developer offering a couple of units, my understanding is that anybody who was displaced has access to an apartment anywhere, that the developer has an apartment. And then the other thing is that I think I heard that sometimes, like if there's a winter storm, the state will get involved and they will make a little payment to each homeowner based on, I don't know if it's the cost, the totality of it, but maybe each person gets $1,000 or $5,000. Do you know anything about that plan?
I am happy to explore all state options, and we can work through
Okay.
those, and maybe Senator Lesser can speak
Okay.
to that. But if there is anything available, I will make sure that we let the town know, we let the residents know. I do, any time I get some information, I do send it to the property management group, and they do contact the residents. So I'm trying to get information out real time.
And you send it to Ray also?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Prakash?
Representative Wood, can you comment on what kind of steps your committee can take to help the homeowners who have been declined insurance?
Well, it's that's a great question because they're declining based on not having flood insurance. So I think as we move forward here, if we don't live near waterways, are we getting flood insurance for our home? Some of the residents did get some coverage, and it was because they had a different type of insurance. They may have had additional coverage on a family heirloom or a piece of jewelry. I think there was someone with computer, equipment. But how do you plan? You're doing everything right as a homeowner. You're taking out insurance, and then we actually have an insurance agent here. You just don't anticipate 8 feet of water coming through your home if you're not living near a stream. Right. You don't have to have it.
He said you didn't have
No,
to we're out in a flood zone.
Right.
My question, Representative Wood, is more about going forward, what you can do as a representative and as the chair of the committee, and having some influence over the insurers, right? So that's what I'm looking for. I totally understand the situation the homeowners are in, but what can your committee do?
Well, I'm using my position to appeal to the insurance companies that even though they didn't have flood insurance, could we offer some sort of coverage to the residents? That's a larger discussion. If you don't have a certain insurance coverage.
But can that be possible through the disaster declaration, like if that happens through the governor's office? And
There
is
would
there
be
some
access to FEMA dollars in that case? Insurance coverage of this sort of thing is
because it really breaks my heart that people have to go to GoFundMe page, which I'm totally happy to support and reach out to people, as many people I can, and share that. But it just breaks my heart that we have to do that. If we have to do that, we have to do that. But
yeah, I think there's even with insurance, everything, this is the issue. We're going to fight the insurance. There's no question. I've already said that. What are we doing right now? This is immediate needs for residents. There's potential mold growing. There's wet stuff. How do we move a little faster as a, community? I think it is doing GoFundMe pages, asking for corporate sponsorships, asking for the developer to say, hey, can you step in? We really have to think outside the box in a disaster like this. So I'm here to offer, those kind of outside the box thinking, but the long-term plans of proper insurance coverage and all that stuff, I'm happy to take that stuff on now. I think there's an immediate need that we need to address.
no, thank you for working with the town and this committee, and looking forward to working with you as well.
Councilor O'Sullivan?
No questions.
Senator Lesser.
Yes, so this is a 45-minute special meeting, and we tried to get the experts out so you could have a presentation and we can revisit issues, but in the essence of time, we're going to go with our senator, and then we may have to wrap it up because there's town council.
Can I comment, Mr. Chairman?
We want Senator Lesser to speak.
Yes.
Senator Lesser, please.
Thank you, members of the Public Safety Committee, Mayor Murata. I'm sorry I can't be there with you tonight. My legislative assistant, Robert Downs, who's a Rocky Hill resident, is in the room with you. Robert, if you could raise your hand. Look, since the July 3rd flood at Cedar Hollow, I've been in touch with a number of folks. I first heard, I think, like Representative Wood, I first heard from a resident directly about the flood a couple days later, and since then been in touch with a number of residents, also been in touch with the town and numerous state agencies about this. I would just make a couple, I don't want to rehash everything that you've heard so far. I just want to just talk about a couple other things. I think it's really, really important that we document the scale of the damage. I think one of the challenges we're facing is that the damage may not be high enough to trigger the FEMA threshold. And that's why it's so important that the town really keep good notes about all of the damage that happens. And that's also important for the farms that have been damaged in the flooding as well. I just talked earlier today with Commissioner Hurlburt from the Connecticut Department of Agriculture, and he really stressed to me how important it was to fill out a survey that the Department of Agriculture has sent around trying to find out the scale of the damage. We know of some damage in Rocky Hill, but it's important that all of the affected farms fill that out because the more data we have, the easier it is for us to free up federal disaster funding. Some of the things that we're pursuing, I just want to say there's a possibility of some funding or assistance from the Federal Small Business Association, the Small Business Administration, and I'm going to be talking to the director, Catherine Marks, tomorrow about that. We're hoping we can free that up. There's also, in addition to the BOOST program through DECD that Representative Wood mentioned, there are also some other potential avenues. They're in the bond package that we approved this year. There was some funding for weather-related disasters. That still has to go through a couple of administrative hoops before we can really access it. But I'm hoping that working with the governor, we're going to be able to make that a possibility going forward. This is just a really tough situation, as Chief Garayes mentioned. This is, and others, we don't necessarily have all the tools that we need to support residents, but anything that I can do to help address, to work with state agencies and help free up funds and help ultimately get federal funds flowing, it will be will be super helpful. And I know that we have an ask in right now with the U.S. Department of Agriculture for our farms that it's really important that we can get them to release to expedite ad hoc disaster funding, which should be available. But as Representative Wood just mentioned, it's just a question of time. We have an immediate need that we've got to address now to bring relief to the homeowners, to the farms as well, and to any other businesses that we may not know about. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I think the totality of the collaboration, there's bound to be some type of relief available, right? Between this town hall folks working and the state delegation pressuring various folks. Hopefully we can get some answers soon. I'm just going to make a suggestion. I don't have the authority to vote in these meetings, but I will make a suggestion because I know that folks want to be heard. Deputy Mayor cannot extend this meeting because the town council meeting has to go forward at 7. I would make the following recommendation, however, that everybody just stay where you are because we begin every town council meeting with public comment. So whether you're heard on this record or whether you're heard on the council record, you're still being heard. And in fact, when you're before the council, you'll have, the ear of 9 people as opposed to, this small group.
Yeah. Senator Lesser, thank you. Are you going to try to stay on for council? Or log back in for our council session, or?
I'm gonna stay on for a bit. I don't know how long I'm going to be able to stay on.
Okay. All right. With that, I'm going to call for a motion to adjourn so we can start the town council meeting, and we look forward to whoever can stay coming to the podium. So
yeah,
motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Thank you.